Well, good morning, everybody. In today's video, this is what my focus is going to be. We're going to talk first about Tropical Storm Debby, have some information that this is going to get picked up by the mid-level winds much quicker and out of the United States faster, and that's good. It's going to reduce some of the flooding threat as it progresses toward parts of the Northeast. We're going to walk into some of the new model data that's out for the next 7 to 10 days and look at some pretty significant trends in the central United States, but some very, very large model-to-model differences. And that kind of gets me to an important point here. There are some very large model discrepancies that are showing up not only in the near term, but in the longer term. And I want to discuss some of those and show you how bad some of the forecasts have been as of late. And these are forecasts that I have kind of bought into, and they're turning out to not validate very well at all. So we'll take a look at what's going on there. I'll stretch it out as far as I can, but tomorrow we'll look at the new NMME data in the Friday update. So that's all ahead of us. Take a look at the radar animation one more time here. This is Debby finally back on land early this morning and delivering a lot of rainfall. Now, just thinking this through, here's the last 7 days of total accumulated precipitation. And if we look at it, we have several areas in here that are well over a foot of rain from this, some places topping 15 inches. And even though I don't have a label on those areas, I just picked a group of cities to put these labels on. We can see that the rainfall amounts have been very, very large. There has been, in the last couple of days, a bit of an overestimation as to how much rainfall was going to be here, which is, I want to be very clear here. We're still talking about over a foot of rain, but some of the models were projecting up to 20 inches of additional rainfall, and that's not come in. But just in the last 24 hours through 7 a.m. Eastern time this morning, we got a good glimpse here of as that circulation was coming right on shore, and just in the last 24 hours, some places picking up here, another 5 to 6 inches of rainfall. Now, I mentioned this system is going to get pulled more quickly toward the north and east, and what we're seeing is a couple of things. There's a bit of a push around this subtropical high on this side of it. Here comes the winds in that broader trough that's dipping into the midsection of the country, cooling things off. And it's just going to grab Debby sooner and pull what's left of Debby more quickly into the northeast. It's also going to pull this, I think, farther inland. Some of the new forecast data from the National Hurricane Center are showing that a decrease to tropical depression status today. And then notice how the track is much farther inland through Pennsylvania, New York, getting Vermont, New Hampshire, and exiting somewhere here, closer to the Canadian Maritimes by Sunday. So originally the 2 a.m. Saturday update still had this system somewhere around Washington, D.C. So this is a little bit of an increase in the overall speed. You can see from the all hazards weather map, though, where they've kind of extended the flood watches, going right now through some very dry area here. We'll take a look at that in a few seconds. So this is going to be, it's going to be drought relief, but in the form of excessive rainfall and flooding. Meanwhile, much of the heat is going to stay very far to the south as the deeper kind of pool of cold air continues to drive itself into the midsection of the country. And of course, we still have air quality issues in the northwest where the wildfires are. But I want to take a closer look at some of the new model data. This is the newest from the WPC. The WPC was the model that had been, I think, over-predicting the extent and the total amount of rainfall. It's been the one I preferred to show you, but I think we just need to be transparent that it's been a bit too aggressive with rainfall. And as you can see, its latest update here for parts of the southeast, we still have another 4 to 5 inches of rain. It's going to be enhanced as you get up toward the mountains. So this is going to cause some flash flooding issues here that'll be induced by topography. But over the next 7 days, as this moves on out, you're getting a total rainfall amount here. If we just take a look at the northeast, just kind of zooming in again, heavy rainfall, widespread 2 to 3 inches of rain possible out of this as it moves north with locally heavier amounts, 3 to 4 to 5 inches right into this part of Pennsylvania, sections of West Virginia, Maryland. All right. Now, I was thinking about this particular spot. I'm just going to show you the last 14 days. We know that there has been drought in this area for the second half of summer, right? We are really the mid part of summer. We've looked at that a lot, but lately we have seen quite a bit of wet weather in here, including some nasty severe storms that came through here earlier this week. But if you take a look at these pockets in through here where we've had in the last couple of weeks, some places lower than 30% of their average precip, this is going to be a major breakaway from the drought in that area. The new drought monitor should be out pretty soon too, so it won't include that. It'll be next week's drought monitor that shows these changes. Here's something, though, that's quite interesting to me about this tropical season. I had mentioned in my report, if you get my report on Monday, I put a graphic in that suggested that this area of subsidence that was kind of moving across the East Pacific toward this part of the tropics. I thought this would maybe put a bit of a lid on any tropical development, maybe in the Gulf of Mexico, Caribbean, or Western Atlantic, at least to try to slow it down. But, what happens here is, and I've kind of mentioned both sides of the story, I keep saying there's a lot of rising motion over Africa, the big temperature distribution differences across parts of the Sahel and the storms that are being driven there. That's being supported by rising motion in these areas. And it does appear as though we're going to be able to get systems to come off of Africa and feed into this warm water. What it appears is that anything new that forms in the main development region will likely make a turn away from the East Coast, at least based on stuff I have today. And understand model performance, in my opinion, has been terrible as of late. But given the position of the Bermuda High and the fact there will be some upper level subsidence here that's trying to move into the Caribbean, any new storm system will likely, I think, curl tighter to the Bermuda High than get over toward the United States. Now, that can change in a heartbeat, and that's why we do these videos every day, to keep on top of that. But before I leave this sea surface temperature map, this is data valid through August 6th, which means we would have seen where, right in these two areas where the influence of Debby's kind of extraction of heat from the ocean would have been, and it didn't take much out of it. We're still much above average. So let's go and have a look at the new forecast. So there's that Bermuda High, and there's Debby. And what you're going to notice as we play through the European model forecast of 850 millibar heights and winds is that we've got a couple of tropical systems, one here, and there's one right down here, that are going to kind of spin up by the time we get through the weekend into early next week. So this is Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of next week. This is the operational European model run. We are now, a full week out in the forecast. But we've got a low here, a low there, and a low here that are forming. And you notice that the Bermuda High is kind of skirting over. And like I said, there could be some upper level subsidence in this area. And it seems as though that's going to take these systems kind of following some sort of, track like this. Now, again, there's no guarantee that this doesn't form and push farther to the east. It just seems, kind of looking at the meteorology of the situation, that there's a more likely chance that this stays out to open ocean. So we are getting into a time period of increased tropical development, and the new European ensemble is showing this as well. So this is the 10-day outlook from the European ensemble on the probability of tropical depression status low pressure systems. All right, so we can see that will be the lead wave following Debby, and then there's a secondary one coming in behind it, both giving a better than 50% chance of developing at this point. So we'll watch the National Hurricane Center to see their updates over the coming days. All right, from here, I just want to take you back to the U.S., though, and before we think about where those tropical systems start to deliver moisture next week, really not next week, but more than 7 days from now, models have really changed this quite a bit. And, looking at the WPC forecast for the next 7 days from Colorado through Oklahoma into Kansas, Missouri, Arkansas, that earlier in the week we were looking at a larger area in through here that was not expecting to get precipitation. It was the artificial intelligence forecast model that was more aggressive on this early, maybe to give it a little bit of credit, but if rains do come into this area, it'll be critical. Just looking at Kansas, where it's raining this morning, all right, we've got very dry areas that bleed into parts of Missouri, into Arkansas. Look at the Boot Hill in Missouri. Then most of Oklahoma has been very dry these last couple of weeks and enduring very hot temperatures. The panhandle of Texas, very, very, very hot and dry. But it's interesting to note that in the AHPS data for the last 14 days, we have a few places down here in far south central Texas and along the coast that are 600 to almost 900% of normal on precipitation. But to show you what this distribution of precipitation has done, look at the soil moisture. From this part of Alberta and Saskatchewan, right through this part of the Missouri River Valley, getting into the western sides of the Dakotas, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, very dry soil, and also throughout parts of the Delta, getting here into the Ohio River Valley, very dry as well. And you can see the differences across Texas, or the very wet soils that are now in the southeast. So let's get a look at the models, knowing that I have very little confidence right now in their forecasts. I'll make a case for why in a second, but I want to show you what's changed. I'm going to stick with the AIFS on this. I feel like it's done well. For example, remember earlier in the week I said, wow, look how far inland the AIFS was bringing Debby, and now it's verifying a bit better than originally thought. But this is through Friday into Saturday and Sunday. So this is the trough grabbing Debby and pulling it out. The ridge is really suppressed and shoved into the south, which means there's going to be a sharp divide on the temperatures right along this line. And as we play forward into Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week, the AIFS was kind of the first to pick up on broader troughing here and the opening up of a ridge in the midsection of the country. But notice this. This is the 14th, 15th, 16th. So there's the next tropical system that the AIFS is also kicking out, keeping it well out to open ocean. But this is where I think the models, at least the AIFS, picked up on the pattern first with this west coast troughing here. What is now different in the model is this. This trough was not here. If you remember, earlier in the week, we were kind of showing broader ridging opening up and staying in this area. But this shift around towards things is going to really refocus where I think the hottest and driest conditions are going to be. And now all the way through the end of August, we're looking at something that just continues to drive troughs into the west, keeping the ridging squashed down here and possibly really increasing the risk of storms in the midsection of the country going forward. Honestly, these mornings get frustrating when you see such big changes in a storyline that you've kind of created based off of models, and you're starting to see some shifts. So here we go. This was last night. You can see there, of course, Debby, some of the cloud cover over parts of the Midwest and across the upper Midwest and northern plains. There's a lot of wildfire smoke getting brought into this. And yesterday there were some very large storms that kind of blew up out of Colorado and sections of Wyoming, but Nebraska and western Kansas. And it's that kind of continued to move through. And early this morning, just take a look at this. There's Debby delivering a ton of rain. Look at the rain coming through Kansas early this morning and out of parts of Nebraska. This is desperately needed. The problem is the weather forecast models were terribly initialized. I mean, this was the 8 a.m. forecast. Well, let's go back to 7 a.m. That's the 7 a.m. forecast of the radar, and this is what was actually going on. And while, look, it's not even raining, that much right now in parts of South Carolina, way down here, but the model's like filling all of that in, and it really missed on this. I'm not even going to show it to you because I don't think it's got a good initialization. So we're just going to get right into some of the other maps. SPC is watching, broad areas of just thunderstorm risk today, but the slight risk in parts of North Carolina and Virginia. Tomorrow, it's going to move up here and toward the northeast. And then as we get into the day on the 10th, this is where our general risk of thunderstorms is going to be. Now, I want to do that model comparison again, the 7 to 10 day maps. I like this. I hope you do as well. The AIFS, look at this. That's the 7 day and the 10 day. Now, I want you to take note of this. The AIFS, very aggressive going back over to heavy rains in the I states, including Wisconsin, southern Minnesota, and Missouri, so surrounding them as well. And I bring that up because that's out 10 days. This is what the NBM is showing. Notice how much farther to the south that is. They're more consistent over here and with what's coming out of Colorado, but to the south, and then this is the 10 day. Very much wetter farther to the south. So if you compare these two models, I know the projections are different. I'm fixing that. That's all coming out my new forecast model page, which I'll release as soon as I get off the road here. But that is the AIFS. Look at where the wettest conditions are, and here's the NBM. Two entirely different outlooks for this section of the United States. What about the ECMWF? This is the operational ECMWF. That's the 7 day, and here's the 10 day. It doesn't even look close to the AIFS. And then finally the GFS, and there's the GFS 7 and 10 day, and it's got a whole different solution. So this is a very frustrating time as a forecaster to see such inconsistencies in the models. And I want to make a case for why I think they are inconsistent, but first, let's compare them real quick. This is the day 7 forecast where we subtract from the European model the GFS forecast. So where you see the near white colors, that's where they agree. Where we see these colors, it's where the GFS is predicting wetter, and these represent where the European is predicting wetter. And already we can see the big differences here in the midsection of the country, or the big differences here in the southwest monsoon. And certainly the European is the wetter model going up the northeast. But side by side, this is kind of how they shake down. So this is right about when I'm recording, right here, getting into the rest of the day today. I will say this, the GFS's solution, remember earlier in the week when it was trying to take Debby and put it back over Georgia, that didn't verify. So we kind of tick one off here for the GFS in the wrong direction. But going forward, this is through Friday into Saturday, getting into Sunday and Monday of next week. And just notice the differences in the models here in the midsection of the country. Out there to Tuesday and Wednesday, very little guidance I feel like in the models right now. This is out there next Thursday and Friday. And you can see that both models are spinning up a tropical system, but in different positions, which we'd expect. And I'll just take you all the way out there to day 10. And I look at this and I cannot tell you that anything about this is consistent. And it's very frustrating to see the models bounce around so much. I will go ahead and look at the probabilities, though, just for the sake of consistency here. This is the 10-day outlook on the probability of staying under 1/10 of an inch. And we do note that Texas, where the ridge continues to live, at least that's been consistent, has shown up with drier and drier weather overall. But earlier in the week, this was quite aggressive into Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, and throughout the Mid-South at being very dry. And now we notice that there's still a pocket here in the Ohio River Valley, Indiana, Ohio, and Michigan that has a high probability of staying drier. But what's changed is this, like how much this is getting in. And even the European ensemble doesn't follow what the artificial intelligence is suggesting, which is this area is so much wetter over the next 10 days. So I'll just be honest, we have got many pieces to be watching with respect to this pattern as it goes forward. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that the upper level jet stream flow is doing its kind of normal but relatively weak late summer, midsummer kind of lull, and it's not giving us a lot of indications as to where this pattern is going to go. So when we look at the week 2 forecast, by the way, that's out there on the 20th of August, this is what it looks like. We look out there at the week 2 forecasts and we see this. And in fact, all three models kind of looking at entirely different solutions. Can you see just CPC versus the European versus the GEFS? That's the GFS ensemble. And maybe they're most consistent Canadian prairie into the northern plains. Maybe a little bit in the mid-Atlantic toward the northeast. But outside of that, very different model forecasts overall. I'll make a case for this in a second as to what I think is going on, but first let's talk about temperatures. Remember, 2 weeks ago, this was terribly forecast. We were still expecting in the models warmer than average conditions. We then started to see that trend toward the cooler weather, and now it's here. So again, we saw this yesterday, but look at this. 100-degree heat in Texas, 105, 108, 70s in Kansas today for high temperatures. There is Friday into Saturday and Sunday. Look at that cool weather coming through. This is state fair time for a lot of folks, so hey, not so bad. But down in Texas and across the South, extremely hot through Sunday into Monday and Tuesday. We just can't break away from this while this cooler air sits farther to the north. Now, if we look out there day 5 through 10 and look at the temperature pattern, then day 10 through 15, you remember earlier in the week, the European model and the GFS were all tossing more heat into this area, and now it's backed off in this. And I think a major reason for this, what we're missing in this pattern, is primarily in the west. So here's what I want you to see. Positive PNA now drops back down. This is when the ridge tries to just anchor itself into the southern plains, and we get a big trough that extends from the northwest even into the central U.S. at times. Then we get a little bit of weak positive PNA here, and then look at the control run, just bottoms out. And remember, if you remember this, when I showed it to you 2 days ago, the control run went way up here before. And the spread we're getting in the forecast of the jet stream pattern coming into the west is so large, I have no trust in it right now. And I think this is where our problems have come in. La Niña, which was trying to build in July, trade winds just completely fell apart. And what has happened over the last week has been a significant change in these ocean temperatures. Now, I've made a case that if we build high pressure here, it's going to get very hot here in the rest of August, right? Remember that? That's been a story since last week. High pressure there, heat here. And now we look at the ocean temperature change here. In fact, take a look at it. The 7-day change in ocean temperatures has dropped off considerably here and warmed up closer to the west coast. And we've kind of seen a fumbling of what's going on with La Niña. So the net effect of that is, if we just take a look at the sea surface temperatures in the Niña 3.4 region, that's right, out in the middle of the equatorial Pacific here, we've now seen those temperatures, there they are, drop and then bounce right back up. So we've got some major things moving in this area, and now we're starting to see the models pick up on this. If you remember when I showed you the week 3, week 4 temperature anomalies, earlier in the week, they were aggressive, putting these colors right in the midsection of the country. And now the week 3 and week 4, where's it back the heat up to? Canadian Prairie and into the west. And I think that is a reflection of where these ocean temperatures have started to shift. It's a relationship the ocean and the atmosphere have. They're a coupled system. And this is, I think, affecting, or we're seeing the result of changes in the North Pacific in the ocean temperature pattern. And that's moving a lot of things around. So from there, I want to show you this. This is the forecast that was made by the European Ensemble back at the end of July, when we began to build this narrative that the second half of August could be hot. Well, this is the forecast made at the end of July for the 7th through the 14th, the week we're in right now and that we're going to continue. Take a look at the newest data. That is the new forecast from the 7th to the 14th. Again, yesterday all the way through the 14th. Major whiff in the models on these temperatures. And so this is making me really call into question some of my earlier evidence I thought I saw in the models at predicting a warm end of August. I mean, just take a look at this. This is now the new forecast for, let's go August 15 to September 15. Now I'm sitting here going, maybe down here it's hot. But we've now seen this model miss on this many times. And I also then have to question, will we really get this type of precipitation pattern? Because we've seen some of the near-term forecasts dumping lots of rain into these corridors and maybe keeping the driest farthest to the south in Texas. So that is a lot of things to call into question. I think a lot of it has to do with finally a budging of things going on in the tropics, but over in the Pacific, the MJO is now forecast to pop out in the Indian Ocean. You saw it in that Hofmuller diagram I showed you, 15 minutes ago. And if it starts to move itself around, it's going to affect several things. But the biggest thing that's bothering me right now is this. We thought in July we were finally starting to get some hints of La Niña development. But now, if you look at the end of July and the beginning of August, the Southern Oscillation Index has dropped all the way back down to -10. Now you say, well, what does this mean? Well, if we were talking about the development of La Niña, which is what we were seeing here, I was expecting to go this direction, and the trade winds never did it. So what does this mean? If the Southern Oscillation Index, which is a part of the MJO, it's a part of La Niña, it's a part of the flow in the tropics over in the Indian Ocean and in the Pacific Ocean, which, of course, is all upstream of our weather patterns in North America. Well, this is what you tend to get. If the Southern Oscillation Index stays negative, historically that correlates with cooler weather here where these warmer colors are. You're going, Eric, what do you mean? Okay, this is a correlation map for August with temperature. If the Southern Oscillation Index was positive, then the positive correlation values mean warmer. But we're not. We have a negative SOI, meaning that this would represent cooler conditions, a complete kind of 180 from the story I built for you last week. And on the precipitation side of it, let's flip over to that, create a plot. Where you see the cooler colors, this would be drier if the SOI was positive, but it is negative, meaning this corridor tends to stay wetter when the Southern Oscillation Index is doing what it's doing right now. Now, again, I'm picking on one thing, but I think it has a relationship with what's going on in the North Pacific, and we also have all the activity in the North Atlantic with tropical systems, meaning all of this will be a wild card going forward. So this is a bit frustrating for me, right? And for a lot of us, when we think we have a narrative and that it collapses. That also is going to change this. We've been looking out there at trying to figure out the start of the monsoonal season, and the European model probably is all over the place with the forecast for South America. And you know, some of the bigger problems with South America, if we just go to one of my favorite sites, earth.nullschool, take a look at what's going on the, like at the polar vortex level down here in Antarctica. Super, super strong. And as a result of that, well, at least complementing that, we've had this very strong, look at this, just circumnavigating the South Pole with the westerly winds here, jet stream pattern. What we're waiting on for the monsoon, we got to step this down to about, 850. What's waiting on right now is the development of high pressure in this area that can start to toss flow over. But as it stands, all the action is right in through here where there's a frontal boundary, and we've got flow coming out of the subtropics, which is dry into this area. So long story short, why did I show you that? Well, you see it's dry in here, but there's wetter conditions where that frontal boundary is. But this will be top of mind for me. Watching the storms come off the Sahel and possibly build into tropical systems, that is going to be a major feature going forward, despite the subsidence that's in this area and the temperature patterns reflecting that. So I just wanted to be transparent with some of the things we've seen change in the last couple of days, and we'll take another look at it when I get home tonight. I'm in Owensboro today. Should be home tonight, and we'll get another forecast video out for you tomorrow. Have a good one. We'll talk then. Thanks.